welcome back to Highwayman Trucking and My Way on the Highway. Just a little bit of a rant here on freight prices. Those of us with our own authority or owner-operators, it's a constant worry, constant battle trying to figure out what's going on, what's affecting it, what outside dynamics are involved. And I've kind of come to my own conclusions. And I'll tell you what my conclusions are based on. They're based on years of being in the military surplus business and paying to ship freight from point A to point B, buying containers of freight overseas and having them shipped into this country. They are based upon friends of mine that are business owners that ship things all over the world as well. And we oftentimes in the trucking world are fed all these lines about this and that are affecting the freight rates. There's been articles out recently that there's an overabundance of trucks and not enough drivers, or a driver shortage, and that's affecting the rates. The new tariffs that are possibly going to be into play from China and the U.S.'s little trade war are going to affect rates. And while each of those dynamics plays a small part in the freight game, I don't believe that is necessarily the case as to why our freight rates are so drastically low right now. And I'll tell you why. When we were in the surplus business, we would call any one of a dozen companies to get something shipped from point A to point B. We would buy truckloads of clothing, we would buy truckloads of ammo cans, containers of brand new goods coming from overseas, China, Korea, etc. And we were never really given a choice of what we wanted to pay or not pay. Those rates were always set by the brokers, always. We very rarely ever saw any prices go down, and if they did, they were not substantial by any means, but they would increase continuously. And I base this not just from my experience in the military surplus business, but my wife's, who had 25 years before I ever met her in the business, running her parents' business. And we would also get goods shipped from various vendors around the country. Some of those vendors are still very, very good friends of ours. They're manufacturers, some of the biggest names, brand names rather, in military and law enforcement clothing, the public safety sector, everything from tactical gear and vests to backpacks and boots. I mean, we really were in that world very tight for a long time. And I've talked to a lot of these people and found out that they basically, even though that they might have been much larger accounts than we were, they shipped the exact same way. They didn't have any control over what was going where and how much it was going to cost. They were basically told by broker A that it's going to cost this much going to point B. And that's very consistent. I have another good friend of mine who owns a plastics manufacturing company, does a lot of open deck freight shipping. And again, same scenario. He's never really seen rates drop. He's only ever seen them increase over time. The rates are always dictated by the freight brokers. Another friend of ours in the aerospace business who ships, really high dollar parts all over the world, and same scenario. So I can gauge what I'm saying from a small mom and pop outfit to companies that do over $100 million a year, based on just my personal experience in shipping things and knowing people that ship things and so forth. So coming over to the trucking side, when I hear all of these excuses put out there as to why the freight rates are so low, it makes me question. It makes me question the reality of the situation. Now, I don't disbelieve that, major financial strains put in place by tariffs on overseas goods, and that being Mexico as well, can affect the freight rates. I very much think that they can. Now, does speculation of those tariffs affect freight rates? I really don't see that, and I'll tell you why, because nothing is concrete. The dollar is not increased yet, and therefore it's not passed on to the customer at this point in the game. Now, you might say, well, maybe they're going to hike it up right now so that they can, make the difference up should this come. And that's not really realistic, and I'll tell you why. The freight, everything in this world, as we all know, is transported via truck at some point in the game, whether it's, from production to manufacturing, what have you. It comes on a truck. And there's no possible way with any realistic view that they could try to bridge the gap of what's going to happen or not going to happen. It all boils down to, in my opinion, not a shortage of drivers, not a shortage of trucks. It boils down to freight brokers. And I believe, it is my firm belief, that these major brokers, and I'm not going to name names, but you know who they are. It's pretty obvious who the major brokers are, that they control the freight rates, quite honestly, and have for many, many years. And they may use articles to maybe take the heat off of themselves. They may use these articles to try and explain away the rationale of the rates. But I have seen it on a small scale time and time again, where one broker will be offering an honest rate, the next a very subpar rate. And I've even had with a major carrier that's owner-operators and a freight brokerage firm, where on particular loads from point A to point B, going the same exact location, the same commodity, the same load, where a broker will say, I'm all in at $1,200. That's as much as I can do. That's every penny. And I'll look down the load board, and it'll be a different broker from the same agency that'll come back and say, I'm all in at $1,600, man. That is my best rate. That's what I can do. Now, because I'm a smart ass sometimes, I have called back that broker that was at $1,200, and I said, so the best you can do is $1,200, huh? And they're like, yeah, that's it, man. That's all the money I've got in it. I'm not making anything. I'm like, that's funny, because such and such from your freaking brokerage company has the same load in at $1,600, and he says he's all in. So what's the deal here? And of course they're, basically stumped and stupefied when they get called out on it, and they don't have a rationale, and usually they hang up. But the point being is, the guy that had the load at $1,600 is still making a living off of selling that load to me for $1,600. So the guy at $1,200 is just uber greedy. And I believe that every single person has a right to market their goods as they see fit. I believe that everybody has a right to earn a living and to make a good living. I'm not the person that's envious of someone that's very successful. I'll be quite honest with you. I know a couple of people in my life that have gone from rags to riches. One of them's a billionaire. The other one's worth, $100 million. And I've met several people like that in my life. I worked for a company when I first started driving a truck, and the guys were bitter, and they had 600 trucks. But you know what? It started with one guy and one dump truck out of South Dakota, and he now has over 600 trucks in 3 or 4 different states. And people that worked for him, it was a good company. Things were pretty good. They had decent pay and so forth. And guys would get so jealous when they would hear that, oh, the boss has a new airplane. He's got 4 already. You know what? I hope he has 5 airplanes, because that means he's successful. That means the company's successful. That means I have a job. That means you have a job. Think of all the people that 600 trucks can provide for. That's a lot of moms, dads, kids, uncles, aunts, nephews, nieces, grandparents that provides for. That's a lot of grocery stores in my area and in those other 3 or 4 states, areas, who get an influx into their personal economy based on this one guy. So I do not envy success with evil intent. I mean, I envy success. I think everybody has the right to become successful in whatever they're going to do. So me saying that these brokers may have outlandish prices, I think that they work too hard to control the market, and that they try to do it on the backs of the truck driver. You know, there was some loads out of Idaho Friday, going right back home. And I'm just going to tell you, it's about 909 miles from here to Chandler Mesa, Arizona. Coming up here, the load was $2,100. Going back, the 90-day average on DAT, Trucker's Edge, is still $2,100. Well, one company in particular is putting loads out there for $1,300. Okay, $1,300 going to the same place. And they were heavy loads. They were 47,000 pounds. And those of you that know the trucking industry, that's a heavy load. And your fuel is not that great at 47,000 pounds. And I looked this company up, and sure enough, they had, their credit rating was ridiculous. I mean, their credit rating was like 50. Out of a 1 to 100, they were 50. I don't do business with anyone less than 90. Most of the companies are 90 to 100 average credit rating. But not only did they have a 50 credit rating, they were at like 57 days to pay. So that tells me they don't pay their bills, they argue their bills, and when they do pay, they pay outlandishly long terms. So obviously I'm not going to do business with them, but somebody's going to. And what it gets down to is companies like that are really lowballing and undercutting the freight allow other companies to say, well, hey, this guy's doing it, we're going to cut it down. That broker's still making above and beyond his percentage. But if we'll move the freight for cheap, they're going to do it all day long. You know, now I understand, hey, I had a family emergency come up, I've got to get home to my wife and kids, or you know, my son starts school next week, I want to be there on the first day of school. I get that. And by all means, that $1,300 is better than running empty. But for somebody that owns a trucking company, an owner-operator, or has your own authority, to run for $1.10 a mile is absolutely ridiculous. I know what my costs are in this truck and trailer between fuel and def and maintenance and things like that. And for me to run and make what a company driver makes, or less, oftentimes less than a company driver, is not worth the risk. And all we do by taking loads like that, and again, this is not applying to you if you have to get home. I get it. Or maybe you've been out 3 months and you're like, I'm out of here, I'm going home. I understand that. This is not geared towards you. This is people that will just take that freight just to take it. All you are doing is hurting every single one of us in the business. Every single driver, every single owner-operator, every single person with their own authority. And for company drivers, you know, you don't really have a choice of where you're going. Smaller companies, you have a choice of where you're sending your guy. And I know you don't like those rates any more than we do because you're not making anything. You know, if that truck costs 60 cents a mile to run and you're paying that driver, let's say 45 cents a mile, now you're at $1.05 and, you know, it's paying $1.10, $1.15. It's not worth it for you. And I think we really have to do a better job of sticking by one another and telling these brokers, no, you're not going to rip us off. It's my butt out here. It's my freaking authority. It's my insurance. It's my life on the line on the highway. It's my pocketbook when this truck breaks down. And I'm not going to do that kind of freight. I'm not going to do it. Sit there and enjoy it. And you know what? More often than not, when those loads will sit, if you'll notice throughout the day, they start increasing in value. And what's amusing to me is when you call at 8 o'clock in the morning, and the guy's all in at X number of dollars, and then at 2 o'clock he miraculously went up $300-400. It's like, it's clearly a game. He did not call that customer and say, well, can I go an extra $600? No, he already had that padded, and he's just willing to let it go to move the freight, because oftentimes they want to appease the customer to act like they're a good broker that can move their customer's freight. And we just need to do a better job of sticking together, not taking crap freight like that. Sure, sometimes the area just is what it is and you have to get out. I understand that. I understand sitting costs money. You know, above and beyond the cost of money, it's wasting your time to sit. I get that. But we've got to do a better job of sticking together, banding together, and telling these big brokerage companies, you're not going to control this freight market. It is not up to you what I make. It is not up to you to keep those of us in this business subservient to you. You know, a lot of people are afraid to say boo to these brokers. I mean, I'll bite their ass right back. I mean, my wife's been next to me when I've talked to them, and they get smart or snotty with me, and you know, and it's funny how many actually will call me back after I hang up on them. Well, will you do this or will you do that? No. You know, why don't you be honest with me to begin with? Honesty, integrity, and unification have really got to happen in this trucking industry. These brokers, I've put out videos on a couple of bad brokers, but there are some good people out there. You know, this load coming up here was, I believe, a husband and wife brokerage company, and man, they were super nice people to deal with. They were honest. They offered a fair rate coming up here right off the bat, no games, and I appreciate that, you know, because they're just trying to make a living for their family as well, and they have a right to have unlimited income. What they don't have a right to do is to affect an industry as a whole with high freight prices, in the sense that what these major conglomerates do is they basically bond together and say, we're going to suppress the freight in this area. And I know damn well they do it. You know, and then, you know, one company will point the finger at the other company and vice versa to put the blame off on them. But they know damn well what they're doing. And stick together, guys. Just a little bit of a ramble and a rant, and maybe it doesn't make any sense, maybe it does. Those of you in my position obviously have thought some of the same things and probably have some of the same views. If you like the video, please subscribe. If you want to be notified of future, ring the bell. And have a blessed day. Hopefully it's a profitable week for you.